I want to welcome you to the world of Batocera. So in short, Batocera is a Linux-based piece of software that is driven by the community, and throughout the many years people working on it, you have this amazing piece of software that you can install on a lot of different kind of devices. If it's let's say an handheld, a laptop, or just another mini PC or a desktop, you can play thousands of retro games through emulators and have the option to enjoy the old school days. But the Batocera world, there are so many different ways to actually play. And when it comes to, let's say, mini PC solutions, we live in an absolutely amazing time where we have all kinds of cheap mini PCs. You can actually just play like all kinds of retro games for not a lot of money. And if you're going to be seeing this video in the future, it's highly possible it's getting more, let's say, cheaper, and also you're having all kinds of mini PC getting even in the end more powerful. So less money and more power. One single, let's say, ultimate or best PC is not out there because everyone has their own personal needs. Think about what kind of platforms you want to play and of course what kind of budget you're having. Because you can buy a mini PC for $50 but you can also buy one like for $800, $900. That will result in a completely different emulation performance. But the question, do you really need that? And that is one of those many subjects we're going to be discussing today. Also doing a quick overview of a couple of mini PCs, plug and play solutions, but also stuff you can actually make yourself. But let's first start off with how you can do it yourself. But how about the Batocera and the storage options? There are all kinds of different ways you can store your Batocera image and just play. So start off with the SSD, one of the, let's say, favorite ways to go to, because a solid state drive is very reliable. However, it is a very expensive option compared with other things you're having here on the table. But that's one thing to take consideration. A cheap option is the 2.5 platter disk. I think they were like 2 terabytes are very affordable, but again, yeah, they are a little bit slower, but they are like really cheap for storage. The thumb drive is another great way to play, but a very expensive way. And if they're like reliable like an SD, I think, my opinion, not really, depending also what kind of brand and size, because these smaller ones can get really hot when it comes to that. And of course, the 3.5 inch drive. This is like the cheapest way you can go to. You can get yourself all kinds of storage capacity, but of course if you can build it in your machine, you can also use an external hard drive enclosure. I would recommend a faster one like a 3.0 USB at least. Okay, so how about installing the Batocera? But where do we get it? From the Batocera website, and take consideration that we do have different versions, also when it comes to formats, but also pieces of hardware. So that is one of the things you need to take consideration and getting the right one over here. So in our case, most of the time it's x64, but also x86 for the really old stuff. You're just going to be downloading your file, and with Balena Etcher, here we're going to be writing the image to your storage. Balena Etcher is one of those programs, but you have a couple of other ones that do the same kind of job. But Balena Etcher is just a very nice looking program and works quite well. But when everything is installed, you will get these messages for formatting. Please don't format, otherwise you're going to be ruining your image. But that's it, you're ready to go. And if you want to add games, you can do it through Batocera itself, or you can plug in your storage device. In this case, it will pop up a special partition where you can add your files if you need to. However, I'm going to be rebooting the device itself, where you're going to be using, and then getting into the Batocera. If the Batocera doesn't boot up, so what you need to do is set up that is going to be booting always into Batocera as the first boot device. But if this still is a problem that it doesn't boot up in a Batocera, even if it's been set to the first boot device, it's highly possible that you do have a problem with secure boot. Then we're having all kinds of plug and play solutions, like a Kinect hard drive. You can just plug it in, configure this on your PC, and you're just ready to go. A very cool and easy way. Or we're having these complete kits even, and with this nice case, by the way. Yeah, it comes with a hard drive, but also with controllers. The controllers itself depends where and what you're going to be buying. Not the biggest fan of these things, because they're like fake PlayStation 2 controllers with no rumble function, and some of them are just having a chemical smell. They do implement a nice manual explaining how you need to set it up. If you have any problems with the controllers or anything else, everything has been, let's say, put in the manual. But of course there are a lot of, let's say, say, tutorials out there that explain all kinds of things. Enough chit chat about this, let's get back to the PCs. But in this case, we're not going to be chit-chatting only about the most powerful device. I just want to give you a couple of things you can actually do. Because I mentioned before that not everybody needs a $900 PC. But there are all kinds of used PCs out there, but also new ones on AliExpress are quite interesting. We have plug and play ready to go kits with Batocera installed. But you also have like stuff you can actually build yourself. And sometimes it's actually free if you have all the necessary parts. And the only thing you need to do is just set it up and have a free emulation machine or buy something ready to go. It's all up to you in the end. We have way too many mini PCs nowadays. I mean, all kinds of brands, different models, different kind of Intel, CPU, AMDs, you name it, it's going to be absolutely impossible to review them all. And then even to talk about the old school dual core Pentium 4 models. I just wanted to do a quick overview of a couple of them I reviewed and I personally quite liked when it comes to that. I already mentioned that it's quite difficult to pinpoint an exact model simply because we have i3, i5, i7, i9 and even different kind of AMD older models and the Ryzen. Too many models with too many variables and making it quite difficult to say that particular model is the one you should pick. So that's one of the things. I'm just going to be grabbing a couple of them. I like it because of the casing and everything you can do with it. But take note that some of them, can be different when it comes to also just the model number or the different version that is in the inside when you're going to be looking onto your local marketplace. But resulting not like a big difference sometimes. So that is not going to be an issue. I think the biggest problem we're having is all of the differences in prices of different regions. The Dell Optiplex is actually a mini PC I've noticed throughout the comments. A lot of people have the opportunity to actually pick one up from maybe a thrift shop, an old PC store or eBay, whatever. You can find them everywhere. But what personally really intrigued me checking this out is just the form factor. This is a really cool mini PC and there's a lot of, let's say, options when it comes to signal output. We have an antenna for Wi-Fi capability, so that is so much better than, let's say, the built-in ones with many of the mini PCs. Has quite a lot of USB ports, including 3.0. That's going to be convenient if you're going to be using Batocera of an external drive, and even have two ones at the front. What I love because you can just use yourself, like controls at the front and also a headphone if you want to, and of course an on and off switch. So these things are super compact and depending on the power, because you have all kinds of different versions and different prices. But I personally didn't really pay a lot for it. But again, this is something that is in my country very often. However, this is one of those many ways to play. And the Optiplex comes in different variations, but this tiny one is kind of beast when it comes to emulation performance. Alright, so this thing comes with some awesome features. To begin with, we do have the option to swap out the 2.5-inch drive for an SD or a hard drive. Then we have like even an internal speaker, so if you like that kind of things. So that is also an option with this. The way how they cool the CPU here is also a very nice way. They're using this special tunnel kind of cooling. Underneath we do have like a cooling element. It sucks the air from the outside and blows it all the way to the front over here. What I also like about it is that we can remove the SSD or the hard drive fairly easy. Another option is pretty damn cool. We do have the option to build in an internal SSD if you want to and pull it on the mainboard itself. But if you need to get freaking like replacing the RAM modules, it's going to be a little bit more hassle. We need to remove the cooling element somehow or the cooler itself because it's underneath here. That's a little bit of a bummer. Alright, so let's start with some MAME and Mortal Kombat. And the reason why is very simple. Mortal Kombat 2 doesn't run on many, let's see, chip devices with this cheap PC. And Batocera, it will have the option to play this game. Alright, so next up what I want to try out is to see if we can run some MAME with Tekken Tag. So Tekken 2 and 3 will run just fine. But what I find out is quite interesting is depending on what kind of CPU we're having, we do get like some different performance. So with Tekken Tag now, we don't have like great performance. And it's quite interesting when you're looking at some other chips, like older ones, they run just fine. So that is always like the more of the gamble. Alright, so next up I want to try some Killer Instinct, and this is a system that doesn't run on a lot of Super Console X devices and Raspberry Pi 4. So I think that's one of those appealing things that we can play with the mini PCs, especially if you of course like this game. We're getting some amazing performance. Alright, so next up let's try some Atomic Wave. I did notice some minor hiccups. but the overall performance is pretty damn good. Okay, so next up, let's try some N64. It runs way better than on your typical super slicks, but I must say, like, I still have some stutters. The weird thing is, like, I've been messing around with this configuration. I think this is just a problem with the CPU that this thing is running on. I've like the latest Batocera in combination with dual channel memory now, and even like replaced the thermal paste, so we don't have any, let's say, thermal throttle from the CPU part. But unfortunately, all of the games that basically uses this freaking CPU has problems. But you know, like, despite a lot of stuff doesn't run very well. So if you go, even if it was like supporting the CPU and the software was everything like optimized perfectly for this, I can tell you that we still have some limitations, especially when it comes to GameCube and PlayStation 2. The version I was using was the i5 7500T. And if you're getting, of course, a newer version, and but also depending what kind of Batocera image version you're using, the combination of all can have like an overall different result. So the HD graphics 630, I think that's one of the bottlenecks we're having if you want to do a little bit of an upscaling. But later on in the video, I will show you in different video parts that what you can actually do if you want to have more 4K upscaling, but still on the budget. You can build these mini PCs, but also buy them used for not a lot of money. But this mini PC has been built by somebody else, or he purchased this from a store like this. But why did I buy it? Simply because to showcase what you can do when it comes to emulation with such a cool device. Where this thing is not like the most tiniest device out there, it's still very compact and has a lot of power inside. But compared with another mini PC, think about the Pro Desk or Elite Desk, you can see this thing is quite a beast. Let's take a peek in the inside. We can open up this case fairly easy like that. Just slide it open like a normal case that we have in many generations now. So the overall construction of the case is very nice. So in here we're finding an MSI mainboard, and here you can just see all of the parts in the inside. So you can actually, I would say, like upgrade, it depends. So we can maybe reuse the case itself. You can see that this is not like capable of having an extra, let's say, utilization of a GPU. But it's kind of interesting that we do have over here an option for a PCI slot. So actually this mainboard itself utilizes it, but the previous owner is kind of hit on the downside that they went for this particular case. Good, so having 30 Celsius idle, and it's been running for quite a long time now. However, so we're having OpenGL 4.6 and we're running with the i5 7500T CPU that has been on 2.70 GHz. It has 4 CPU numbers or cores and has a max of an overclock of 3300 MHz. So when it comes to the HD, we're having the HD graphics from Intel, the 630. It's quite unfortunate that we can't add another GPU like an NVIDIA, a basic one. That would be so much more like an overall performance boost, but maybe we can do something about it later on in a different video. But in this video I just wanted to focus on stuff like Panasonic TDO and some other systems that are quite difficult to emulate on cheaper boxes. To see how far can we push it, but also in modern stuff can we even do a little bit of an upscaling. But let's start off with some more emulator machines that had a lot of problems on cheaper game boxes. So N64 is a system that we can play it very great on many, let's say, PCs now. However, we're going to be doing a little bit of an upscaling with 9020 by 4040 if I'm saying it correctly, because I just wanted to see can we actually do a little bit of upscaling with this configuration we're actually using now. So take note, like, it depends where you're going to be living and buying these things, searching for eBay, whatever. There are so many different ways to find these. I noticed this ITX mini PC for not a lot of money. I was there figuring out, like, hey, you know what, let's grab this thing and see how far we can push it. And if you're going to be using a GPU, we can even do some a little bit better upscaling if we want to. However, out of the box, this thing got some really nice power to it, with good emulation of N64 on higher resolutions. So let's move on to some GameCube with F-Zero GX. Oh man, I love this game, so much fun. Upscaled it to 1080p, but you can see that it really struggles getting the frames per second out to 60. Throughout the game it slightly improves this, but you know, I think if you have like an overall better experience, we need to be setting it to 720p. So you know, that is one of those things you need to mess with games to see how far we can push it. And I think one of the downside is not only the i5, the lower, let's put it this way, the 7th generation i5 is great, but we just need to have a little bit of more boost power with the GPU. And the combination of these two are just not enough to have the 1080p going on. Going back to these games, and now we're only having 4K rendering resolution, meaning this looks absolutely amazing. We did have like bezels implemented with an aspect ratio that you like or you hate. However, if you're going to be looking at this, it's just such a fun way to experience these games. And combining with the dock station, I do see some weird glitching going on, but where I can actually see this is running on some great frames per second. It doesn't show actually, somehow the emulator don't let me at this point, but the emulation performance seems to be running just fine. PlayStation 2 with some Tekken 5. It's maybe not the most demanding game. I did notice some minor hiccups, but 1080p, getting into the game, everything seems to be running just fine. So it is absolutely amazing to see that also this CPU GPU combination let us enjoy those old school games in high resolutions and having some overall great experience. Some games like God of War that has like a lot of difficulty like emulating, particularly because they are quite difficult to emulate itself, you should consider getting a different resolution going on. So there's a little bit of tweaking you need to do with every single game. But when you're going to be having the game loaded in, yep, it works perfectly without any problem. Of course, it is a possibility that we do have a hit or miss with more demanding games. So, and if you have like smaller games that can be loaded up fairly quickly, it's kind of cool to see that we can now play these, let's say, PlayStation 3 games on like an older mini PC. And again, there are different versions out there, but even newer, let's say, CPU, GPU combinations, giving us even more, let's say, power for emulation and Batocera, of course. The biggest, let's say, problem I noticed is that not only the different price ranges on different countries, it's also what kind of models they're offering. Because where you have all kinds of Lenovo, Dells, of Fujitsu, Siemens, you name it, all kinds of different versions. The biggest problem we're having when they're getting into the new generation Intels, they are getting really expensive to a point they're not really interesting to buy. Lenovo is another brand that you can find very often next to the Dell and also a very compact design. So this is the i3 model. Yep, if you're going to be emulating some low-end stuff, the i3 can be a great device if you can pick it up for really cheap. But if you want to have better overall emulation, I would go for the i5 at minimum. But again, I picked it up for not a lot of money and I think this is going to be a fun thing to check out. We're going to unplug the original hard drive and we're going to slap this thing in here. And basically what we're going to get ourselves is a completely configured Batocera mini PC. We're going to power it on and we're going to have like a lot of fun. And we do have like the maximum speed because we have it connected with a SATA connector and not with a slow USB. Something I just want to point out, I've noticed in my previous video, is like when you're looking at mini PCs, always recommended that we do have like 2 DIMMs installed. For example, I'm having 8 GB in total, but I have 2 times 4 GB. So in this case, it's more enough for retro gaming, but we do have like the best performance. They messed it up in the beginning with some Super Console X devices. You pay a lot of money for it and you're only going to get like a 60 GB or 8 GB, only 1 DIMM inside. A little bit of a bummer, but I just wanted to point it out. In this case, there's not going to be any problem. See it. So basically with an F-Zero GX, a very demanding game on the GameCube, you're going to get a lot of stuttering and absolutely not a fun gameplay. Let's play a little bit, show you. Maybe we will get a decent FPS here, but there will be parts where it's going to be stuttering like crazy. That's exactly what I mean. Another cool and affordable way is if you're going to be using an MSI Trident or a similar product that will come with a dedicated GPU. This model comes with an i7 or an i5 model, 7th generation, combined with a GTX. I think it was like a 1060 most of the time, but some of them even have a 6060 and of course newer generation Intel. And this is a very cool combination because these mini PCs are getting cheaper and cheaper through the years. So even in the future you're seeing this video, you can do a lot of cool things on Windows gaming, but also on Batocera with this. Combining this with my favorite Xbox 360 controller, yeah, this is going to be absolutely an emulation beast. And thanks to the GPU, we can do a lot of upscaling. Actually for not a lot of money. Time. So this is the 3 series. There are also like newer versions out there. Like this is the i5 6th generation and it comes with 32 gigabyte. Normally it comes with 16 gigabyte. The previous owner did upgrade it. We're going to get the 128 gigabyte SSD, and this thing even comes with an additional 1 terabyte hard drive. And in my case, I'm going to get the GTX 1060. There is also like an 1050 or an 1660, so there are a lot of different variations. That's something you need to take into consideration, but also, yeah, different parts comes with a different price. But okay guys, let's start off with N64 GoldenEye, a very difficult game to emulate. I noticed when 4-player there are some minor glitches here and there, so it's not still perfect, but that's more like an emulator update that we need to have. But overall the performance, it's quite good, and oh man, they they messed up the controls on this game, by the way. Guys, so let's try some MAME, and it will run just fine on this beefcake PC, because we have tried this on $125 mini PCs, like really basic low powered stuff, and MAME runs fine on that. So with an i5 like this, there will be no problem whatsoever. Surprisingly, GameCube runs very well, and I tried a couple of games and I just wanted to show you one of them, and I've tested it and most of the games run just fine. So that is what I love about this system, is that even like the higher end stuff that it will have issues when it comes to some other device I've reviewed here on the channel, GameCube is no problem. Sega Dreamcast, that is a system that runs very well on low powered mini PCs. So when a PC like this, that we can even like upscale it in higher resolutions and still going to get the full 60 FPS. Alright, so next up, Sega Saturn, a very demanding system. We need quite a lot of power to run, especially the three-dimensional games, very well. And here you can see like it runs very good. You really want to implement this particular PC in this video because I think it's a very cool addition. And also for Windows gaming, we can still play a lot of games. But one of my favorite DIY devices to get is a very old AMD Ryzen. So the HP Pro Desk is also having the chipset, and this thing is prehistoric. It's a dinosaur under the tech. However, the performance that this thing actually gives is interesting because you're not paying a lot of money for this, and the HP PCs are, in my opinion, known by their reliability. And we do need a little bit of switching out thermal paste maybe, but that's it, you know. These things are just quite nice, and upgradability when it comes to the memory, it's possible, particularly when you're looking at the dual or single channel. So I think there's even an option for an NVMe installing for Batocera. Yeah, so there are a lot of cool options when it comes to this device, and that is one I think it is maybe one of my favorite ones, and we can switch out the memory for faster, or at least like a bigger one if you're going to be needing that. You need to switch between them to figure out which of the outputs is the one that you're going to be needing for having the right setup for the audio. It's always a little bit of a hassle, and only need to do it once. If you have done this, you need to restart and you actually can fix the main issue of your audio problem. Another thing I wanted to check out is actually what kind of software are we running on this. We can find this with information in the system settings. So in the settings over here and the information, so we have an overview of the image, how much space we're having. The temperature is 30 Celsius at the moment, so that's quite good for a mini PC of this size. Normally they are like 40-50 Celsius, of course, depending what kind of brand. So we're running the AMD Ryzen 3 Pro 2200 GE, but we're having the Radeon Vega graphics. And that last part is going to be interesting because maybe now we can even do a little bit better upscaling than most of those Intel things that we have reviewed here on the channel. So let's get into it. But let's take a close look at the Nintendo DS, a system I did own later on. I still own a couple of DS's, and man, the library, the same story like the Game Boy Advance, like Sonic Rush. Where I didn't like the new generation of Sonic games, this was absolutely an awesome game. And now with this configuration, if you have like a massive TV, this would be one of those cool ways to play. We did enable the bezel today, so we can just use the game and play it like it's supposed to be, because with this game you're going to be switching between the two displays. Next up, 16-bit power. Oh yeah! And if you want to know how to play the game, you need to punch him in the face and kick him in the dick. That's how it goes. However, this was actually one of the first games I owned on the Sega, combined with Sonic the Hedgehog 1. What an epic duo of games. Where still Sonic was my favorite game. This was such a cool game for back in the day. Very smart marketing to actually combine this with the Genesis or the Mega Drive. powering up and getting to the stages, but I was getting really bored after some time with the simple reason I felt so annoyed that every single time I need to collect the power-ups. But next up, let's get into some MAME games, and these old games run on many different devices, including the games that I'm going to be kicking. This guy kicked me, or pushed me in the face twice. However, so when you're going to be play for the third time. Let's try this again. Okay, let's try this again. So what I wanted to say actually is that when it comes to this particular game, it runs on many different devices. Even an old Xbox game sticks for like $20–30. My all famous game, the Mortal Kombat, like the one that I always tested out on those freaking Pandora's boxes. And that was like a hit or miss situation. But I think it's a little bit more demanding than other games, and that was one of the reasons. However, this runs without any problem whatsoever. So when it comes to the arcade part, let's do a quick overview of some autonomous wave with the Dolphin Blue game. I've been testing this many times on different devices, and it doesn't have any problem whatsoever with this particular system. Take note that you also need to set up certain files. And if you're going to be doing some wild, crazy, wicked thing, you can even upscale it with some of the newer emulators. But native resolution, it works perfectly, no problem whatsoever. And this is absolutely a very cool system. Not a lot of games, but the games like Dolphin Blue are a lot of fun. I do see a little bit of stuttering going on left and right, the same with Cruise in the USA. But let's deep dive into some GoldenEye action. You can see it struggles, particularly in the beginning, but getting through the game, you see the game is just playable on these high resolutions. So if you want to have no, let's say, stuttering going on, what you can actually do is just like lower it in resolution, less quality, and we didn't have like overall great performance. However, 1080p, upscaled F-Zero GX on this old PC seems to be running just fine. So let's get into the game, let's skip the intro. And I think it's absolutely an overall amazing performance, having even upscaling options with such an, let's say, low-powered, old-school mini PC. Where I am just Team Intel, when it comes to play, say, having a CPU in my PC, I'm always like flabbergasted how good AMD Ryzen is. Even with this prehistoric version, the performance is crazy. If you're looking at the price you're paying for these mini PCs. But let's get into the PlayStation part. So start off with some PlayStation 1. And what I love about this machine, that we do have the option for 4K rendering resolution, making these PlayStation 1 games through the dock station looking amazing. And I think that is one of those really appealing things. If you're a big fan of the PlayStation 1 games, and you want to experience those old games in a 4K rendering resolution, you can actually do that in such a low budget, cheap way. So what you can also do is getting into, let's say, higher settings if you just want to tinker with it. Same story, like I told you a couple of times now, is that depending on what kind of game you want to play, maybe the two-dimensional game is even less demanding and we can have it higher than 4K. But so far this looks just great. On to the PlayStation 2, we have great performance with 1080p rendering resolution. And yep, you can do tweaking here and there, but I am quite satisfied with such an overall good performance with a Tekken 5. The game has never been looked so great, and then for such a low-powered mini PC. And that, I think it has to do thanks to the GPU, because this gives us so many cool new upscaling options. Dolphin, but also the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 and many other systems. Boot up the game because in the loading it just froze up. But let's get into the gaming and let's see how the overall gameplay will be. But the overall emulation performance is surprisingly good. However, we do have very long loading times getting into the games, of course depending how big the game is itself. But with this game, yeah, we did have a little bit of a problem with that. However, in the game everything loads fast. But when it comes to, let's say, playing and just want to have overall better experience in PlayStation 3, you need to take consideration to get a more powerful PC itself. I've been trying out many different AMD Ryzen ones, and yeah, with more cores and more threads, we have like overall so many better performance. But of course, with a low power device like this, it's just amazing that we can actually even play PlayStation 3 now. And it makes this mini PC, beside the overall upscaling, very cool. The HP Pro Desk with the AMD Ryzen old prehistoric dinosaur chip still is a great overall emulation machine for not a lot of money, and maybe one of my favorite ones in the future, or maybe there's going to be something same kind of mount with more power, but that's something we're going to be seeing in the future. So that is actually the HP Elite Desk, maybe one of the best deals when it comes to these very cheap to the cheap mini PCs. So let's move away from all of the old mini PCs. If you're going to be deep diving into the rabbit hole of AliExpress, the N100 is a very cool addition, because this is a chip that is quite affordable, but also if you're going to be slapping a hard drive with Batocara in it or an external one, you do have a lot of cool emulation options. Where we cannot render everything on a 4K, this thing has some very nice power in the inside. If you want to grab something plug and play from AliExpress, but you do want to have something that is capable of running more and has less limitations, this very strange looking 3D printed case is actually some of the things you can consider with the N100 mainboard in the inside, where they're using in China a lot of old parts when it comes to PCs. This is a brand new part so far, I understand. The case itself is debatable if you like it or not. However, this is a very interesting option, plug and play ready, and you can play actually thousands of different games. Yep, sliding it out, you can see they're using just a Batocera drive in here, a single slot of RAM, and having the N100, a brand new board. So that's absolutely cool with an active situation. But this is quite interesting because this is a board that has a lot of options when it comes for emulation itself. We do have some more options now, so don't expect like say supreme performance but super upscaling. Yeah, PlayStation 1, we can maybe do a little bit on upscaling. PlayStation 3 is in my opinion out of the question, and yeah, we do have overall better performance with Atomic Wave, having some better Dreamcast Saturn, and maybe you can even do a little bit on upscaling, and I think that is a very cool overall option with the N100. I wanted to do a little bit on upscaling or 720p, and the main reason is just wanted to see how far we can push it. Take note that the GPU of the Intels are not my favorite ones on board, with a simple reason, because these things do struggle. We can also lower to 480p, and also depending what kind of game you want to play, but some games are very easy to emulate and you can just even maybe get a little bit of a higher resolution going on. So next up, the GameCube, another great system with very nice titles. However, if you want to play some games with this, we can do a little bit of an upscaling. However, I've been testing it with 1080p, but this is way too much. And also depending what kind of game. If you have two-dimensional games, you can do a crazy upscaling where we're having like so three-dimensional games. We have, let's say, less overall performance when you're going to be upscaling to higher stuff. So if you're on a budget and we do want to have a little bit more options when it comes to emulation, this mini PC is a plug-and-play N100 solution. And of course, if you're going to be making it yourself, it's going to be so much more significant cheaper. So if you're searching for a good solution for emulation, you can combine this with Windows or Linux Batocera. I maybe have a solution for you, or in other words, the best solution when it comes to paying money and getting some good value for your money. So in the end, when you're looking at the mini PCs, take consideration that mini PCs, buying them new will always be more expensive than buying a used one. However, there is still sometimes a very good solution when it comes to buying something new from AliExpress. So there are all kinds of different chipsets I've reviewed in the last couple of years. But the unfortunate part is that not every single chipset is great for overall emulation, particularly when you're looking at PlayStation 2. If you're buying a $99 mini PC on AliExpress, sometimes even cheaper in the sales, or the flash sales they call it, it's highly possible that you can still play everything all the way up from the Atari to the PlayStation 1 period. Sometimes you can even upscale the PlayStation 1. Yeah, it's absolutely nuts if you think about it. But the unfortunate thing is when you're looking at like some other things like PlayStation 2, GameCube, Wii, those platforms cannot be run, or let's say the mini PCs with the Intel Celeron chipset. For example, the 3000 or the 4000 series most of the time. And that is a problem. But now we have something that is quite interesting that is able to run a couple of those systems and sometimes even upscale it if you want to do this. So when it comes to PlayStation Portable and God of War, getting the 60 FPS, we have set it to 4 times resolution. Maybe we can tweak it to 5 times depending on what kind of game you're actually going to be playing. But so far it's going to be an overall good experience. So that's absolutely great. So starting off with some GameCube and F-Zero GX, a more demanding game to emulate. And on 1080p resolution you do see some stutters going here and there. So let's get into the gameplay and let's see how it actually plays. If we still have too many stutters we can also put it back to 720p.
Even just a single ring is an...
But I'm kind of disappointed when it comes to the Sega Dreamcast. We needed to put a 1280 by 960 resolution. And where I was at least expecting full HD, with full HD Dead Alive didn't run that great and had a lot of issues. And that's quite unfortunate. The N100 is a great chip for Batocera emulation. If you want to have something brand new and easy to find, this is another way to go to. And of course, depending what kind of brand and size, there are different kind of price range. However, that is something of a different story in the future. So this was actually the most powerful retro gaming machine they released from the Super Console X line. However, this was just a mini PC you can also buy separately. And that's the reason I wanted to focus on the mini PCs, because this particular solution has also been upgraded and also bought that one too. And I did some crazy cool emulation and gaming on these devices. But what China does, we can also do it ourselves, and I mean particularly when it comes to adding some Batocera to it, because that is the thing they're doing. So this G6 Super Console X was very expensive, and I just wanted to pick it up anyway. However, when you're going to be looking at the PC, the design was quite nice, but specification wise, so this thing, I love the design, but it has an overall, let's say, an older i9 9th generation 8 core in it with a GTX 1650. This is going to be enough for a lot of emulation. Okay, so next up some GoldenEye with N64. I put it also on high resolution, something I don't do very often, especially with the cheap boxer, but I'm more yeah, what the heck, let's push it up all the way to full HD just to see how it runs. You can see some minor glitching in the menu, but it is more like an emulator problem. Let's see how the gameplay in general is. Now we need to figure out which button it is. Oh, there it is. Alright, so next up let's play some Thomas Wave. Well, we had so many issues with this game in previous boxes. We do get occasional hiccup. I did put them on the higher resolution like I did with the other games. I just wanted to see how it runs and how it will look. Alright, so next up I wanted to play some PlayStation 1 with full HD resolution in combination with DuckStation, just to see how it runs and how stable it is. Of course, now we have such a powerful box that we can play easily games like this on higher resolutions. Pretty damn cool. It still looks like shit. This is, by the way, the first game I ever played on the PlayStation 1. So cool. Okay, so next up GameCube with 720p, just to see how far we can push this bad boy. Just left the statistics and the left top corner over there. Let's force them into 4:3 aspect ratio now. You can even have a widescreen hack if you want to, but I'm not going to do that. Keep it simple, higher resolution. Alright, so let's see how it runs on 720p. Oh crap, wrong button. Okay, so next up I needed to mess around with the settings, because because the normal settings was absolutely garbage when it comes to this game and PlayStation 3. Like I say, like the mini PC is going turbo mode now, so basically this thing pushes it to the limit. I'm curious if we can actually play some PlayStation 3 with ray tracing now. In the previous Super Console mini PC they had a lot of issues because it was not powerful enough, but with power like this it should be having no problem whatsoever. I have set it to 1080p. I'm just curious like how fast it will load up and how it will run. Now we do have some weird glitching going on, maybe we can fix with another thing, but I just wanted to see how the speed of the game is. Because yet with the Vulkan backend we can even push it up to 1080p. We're normally going to nerf the freaking PlayStation Portable. We're just going to push it to the maximum level. We're going to leave the buffered on, everything that we're normally going to do with tweaking to getting the best performance. We're even going to upscale it to 1080p, just to see how we're going to get some results. We do some minor hiccups here and there, but besides that, we do get an amazing performance. Yeah, one of the things, let's do a quick look in the inside, and here you can just actually see there is just a simple 2TB platter disk in here that has the Batocera. And that is one of the things, you can just make them yourself and slap them into a mini PC and have the same result, having your own Super Consoles. And that is actually not the same amount of money as this particular one, or maybe it is, but you're getting like maybe 10 times the performance. However, depending how you're going to be building it and where you're getting your mini PC, of course. My personal favorite mini PC for Batocera is actually this HP ProDesk, and that is a simple reason because it's a very common mini PC. And with this prehistoric AMD Ryzen, this thing has a lot of potential when it comes for emulation, but also you can do a little bit of an upscaling. And that is one of the things combined with Batocera why I just actually love this mini PC, where it's still my favorite one. And yeah, where this thing is not even the most powerful one, it's still a very cool item to get and still have a lot of potential to it. However, depending where you're living, I did notice, reading that people saying that some of the places in the world, these things are getting scalped or are going to be sold for a lot of money due of the demand, because these things are very nice, reliable, and of course some of them even comes with dual channel memory. So this thing is a very cool base for just having a lot of retro emulation fun with a little bit of an upscaling. The information, so we have an overview of the image, how much space we're having. The temperature is 30 Celsius at the moment, so that's quite good for a mini PC of this size. Normally they are like 40-50 Celsius, of course, depending what kind of brand. So we're running the AMD Ryzen 3 Pro 2200 GE, but we're having the Radeon Vega graphics. And that last part is going to be interesting because maybe now we can even do a little bit better upscaling than most of those Intel things that we have reviewed here on the channel. So let's get into it, but let's start off with some basic gaming. The Game Boy Advance was actually one of the last Game Boys I actually had and played on. I didn't really play that much on it, but when going back to the game collection, man, that's absolutely a massive game collection, and the overall quality was so much better than the previous games. Alien Hominid, a game that I've been playing on my PlayStation GameCube. Of course they are like slightly looking better, but still the Game Boy Advance was such a cool system. Look at the Nintendo DS, a system I did own later on. I still own a couple of DS's, and man, the library, the same story like the Game Boy Advance, like Sonic Rush. Where I didn't like the new generation of Sonic games, this was absolutely an awesome game. And now with this configuration, if you have like a massive TV, this would be one of those cool ways to play. We did enable the bezel today, so we can just use the game and play it like it's supposed to be. Because with this game you're going to be switching between two displays. My all famous game, the Mortal Kombat, like the one that I always tested out on those freaking Pandora's boxes. And that was like a hit or miss situation. Also this runs without any problem whatsoever. And yeah man, it's just a lot of cool games that you can just play now, and that for a mini PC that doesn't cost a lot of money. It's just fun to deep dive through, let's say, all of these games where we had so many struggles with or couldn't even play on those very cheap basic games. For the arcade part, let's do a quick overview of some Atomic Wave with the Dolphin Blue game. I've been testing this many times on different devices, and it doesn't have any problem whatsoever with this particular system. Take note that you also need to set up certain files And if you're going to be doing some wild, crazy, wicked thing, you can even upscale it with some of the newer emulators. Another system I have been seeing a lot of, let's say, cheap game boxes is Panasonic 3DO. And none of them, or most of them, are not able to run 3DO on full 60 frames per second. So first off, let's do a little bit of rendering resolution of 1920 by 4040, if I'm saying it correctly. So it's going to be some next level when it comes to that. See how far we can push it, and do we have a stable frame rate. Because of course we can do a little bit tweaking, we can even do a little bit more upscaling, but also downscale everything. However, let's get into gaming. So a native resolution, this runs on many different mini PCs nowadays, so that's absolutely awesome. But one of the more appealing things with this AMD mini PC, that we do have like upscaling, and the 64 looks absolutely great. You can see that we have some minor stutters, but not to the point that it's going to be making this game unplayable. So Cruise the USA is one of those test bench games that struggles on so many cheap game boxes. With the Dolphin emulator and some GameCube, I just want to do something completely crazy. Where this is a really old specification of a CPU GPU combination, we're going to be trying some 4K rendering resolution. But you can just hear with Soul Calibur that it struggles big time. It is playable to a certain level, but you know, this is one of those great examples, dipping to 45 frames per second. So what you're going to be needing to do is just lower at everything, maybe make it on 2K. Or if you have like a little bit better luck, you need to have 1080p. Moving on to the PlayStation 2, we have great performance with 1080p rendering resolution. And yep, you can do tweaking here and there, but I am quite satisfied with such an overall good performance with a Tekken 5 the game, because in the loading it just froze up. But let's get into the gaming and let's see how the overall gameplay will be. But the overall emulation performance is surprisingly good. However, we do have very long loading times getting into the games, of course depending how big the game is itself. But with this game, yeah, we did have a little bit of a problem with that. However, in the game everything loads fast. But when it comes to, let's say, playing and just want to have overall better experience in PS3, you need to take consideration to get a more powerful PC itself. But getting into the most expensive, yeah, that was actually one of the most expensive gaming PC emulator retro devices I actually picked up. So this was an i9 12th generation with an RTX 3050 in the inside, and the 3050 was, by the way, also in a TI. However, they also have now a 4060, and later on in the future is going to be having more power for the same amount of money actually. However, this i9 was a quite nice powerhouse when it comes for emulation and performance itself. But of course this thing comes with Windows built in, so if you're not going to be using the Batocara drive, you can actually play some really cool AAA titles. When it comes to an indie games or an old school games like Saints Row 4, yeah, you can actually play a lot of cool stuff on higher, let's say, graphics with 1080p and do a little bit of tweaking maybe to 2 or 4K, but I would not really recommend it with a mini PC like this.
Turn around when it is safe to do so.
Starting off with some PlayStation 2 and my favorite game, Tekken 4. Nevertheless, we're having absolutely amazing overall performance with PlayStation 2, and you can even upscale it to higher resolutions if you want to without any problem. So what is really convenient if you're going to be loading up PlayStation 3 games with such a powerful chip, the loading times are so significantly shorter compared to, let's say, the low-end chips I've checked out in the past. And also when it comes to the resolution, here we can even upscale it a little bit and getting amazing PlayStation 3 emulation performance. PlayStation Portable, no restrictions, we can put it in the highest setting and everything set to the maximum level. That makes these games look absolutely stunning. With maximum power and even newer chips, we're having overall better performance. If you're having an Xbox Classic or you want to even do a little bit of an Xbox 360 emulation, those systems will run perfectly or even better in the future. Of course, we're having already some emulator updates throughout the years, so we're also going to be better performant on these lower end or older chips. So in overall, I think it's quite cool to see what you can do, and with the most powerful PC, here we can play all kinds of emulation to a point that we have no limitations at all. But with a lot of power, we have so many cool emulation possibilities. With the Dreamulator for Dreamcast, we can even put it on the highest settings, no problem whatsoever. You don't need to buy a cheap game box from AliExpress, because these things are completely underpowered and a lot of emulation issues, where Batocera with the right PC combination for you have like the ultimate dream emulator machine. However, that is of course not for everyone, so that's why I wanted to give a couple of, let's say, different options out there so you can make it yourself, but you can also get yourself something plug and play with an N100 chip and play all kinds of retro games. I hope this video helped out. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments, and it would be great to see you in the next video.